boats. They have some missiles, but not very many. I think we're in very good shape.
This is a war imposed on us. Transportation of oil has been slowed down because of the attacks and aggression made by Israelis and Americans against us.
Iran's new leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has delivered a message to the nation. This is his first statement. In a message read out on Iran's state television, Mojtaba Khamenei has issued fresh warnings to the US and Israel. And this is the first time that he has publicly given out these statements after US and Israel began their war on Iran. Mojtaba Khamenei has said that Iran will not refrain from avenging the blood of its martyrs. He also added that all US bases should immediately be closed in the region or attacks will inevitably continue. He's the son of assassinated Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. New leader of Iran, Mojtaba, said that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz should be continued as a tool to pressure the US. Khamenei is the son of late Ayatollah, as I mentioned. He was assassinated on the first day of this war on the 28th of February. President of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian's son, earlier claimed that Mojtaba sustained some injuries in the ongoing war, but remains in good health. There has been no public sighting of him yet. The new Ayatollah has also activated his account on X, where he is identifying as the revolution's leader and not the title of Supreme Leader. That's the title he's assumed, leader of the revolution. Rehbar Enqilab, that's what he calls himself. Title of Supreme Leader has not been taken up by him. Now, the message from Mojtaba Khamenei contradicts earlier statements made by President Masoud Pezeshkian, who issued an apology for conducting strikes on Gulf countries. However, Iran's Secretary of Supreme National Council, Ali Larijani, and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, they have continuously maintained that attacks on US bases in the Gulf and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz will continue. All right, joining me live on Pulse is Ben Aris, founder and editor-in-chief of BNE IntelliNews and also former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. Ben, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for making time. Let's start right off. First statements coming in from Iran's new leader. He's not calling himself the Supreme Leader. Rehbar Enqilab, that's the name he's taken. He mentions a lot of what has been heard from the Iranian leadership till the time he had not made his first statements, but the overall tone, there's a lot of belligerence, there is a lot of vengeance that you sense in it. He's not mincing any words. Your assessment?
Yeah, the Iranians are extremely angry, and the new leader, he's the son of the former Ayatollah, but he's also believed to be closely associated with the IRGC. He represents a hardliner fraction within the government. And of course, they're outraged because as far as they're concerned, Tehran is concerned, this was an unprovoked US and Israel, which is designed to, A, topple the government, and his father and many of the top leaders of the Islamic Republic were assassinated in the very first days with that missile strike. And they want revenge. The US have hinted that they're starting to come to the end of their tether. They're kind of really not going their way, and it's not going to be an easy one to win. And the Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff, has already reached out through mediators to see if there's any interest in starting ceasefire talks. But I think they've reached the point where they're like, we don't trust you, you're completely unreliable, you've been belligerent, we got attacked last year by a US-Israeli coalition, and we don't see the point of believing anything you say, and so we're just going to do as much damage to the US as we can, and they're going to do that through the vehicle of chaos on the international energy markets.
Is that Iran's play, is that the only play that they have at this point, Ben? Because it's understood that they have taken a fair amount of damage across the country, over 5,000 targets That's what the US has said. But if we keep the statements aside, the fact is that Iran is still firing missiles, maybe lesser in frequency, but it is still firing those, and also drones. And it is being targeted. The West Asian nations where US has its bases, they are being targeted. Those US bases are targeted, and other civilian infrastructure has also been targeted. At this point, keeping the bravado aside, keeping the rhetoric aside, how long do you feel Iran can last?
That's exactly the point. I don't think you can read too much into the drop in intensity in the number of strikes that Iran is perpetrating. The point being here is that in the initial exchange, everyone fired a lot of missiles. However, for Iran, they have a huge stockpile, which they've built up over 10 years, of very sophisticated drones and missiles. I mean, you can describe their drones. They make a tenth of the number that the Russians do. But they're like cheap versions of cruise missiles. They're much more sophisticated. They go much further. They carry much heavier payload. And the strategy on the Iranian side is not to win the war. All they've got to do is stay in it longer than the Americans can bear the pain of oil prices going up to $200. So they're scaling back, but they've hidden and dispersed. They executed what they call the decentralized mosaic defense plan. And they've broken the IRGC units into about 30 autonomous units. They've scattered and hidden their drones and missiles all over the country. And what they're looking for here now is to just spin this out, because Trump has a hard deadline. He can't go into the midterm elections in November still fighting this war. But the Iranian army can take as long as they like. And all they need to do is hunker down and not stand in front of American guns, and then keep peppering US bases, Israel, the Gulf states, oil production to cause chaos. And the longer that goes on in what is an asymmetrical war, where there's mismatch between the powers of the military, all they've got to do is spin it out long enough, because the oil prices, the Straits of Hormuz, the main problem, is still closed. And as long as that's closed, the oil prices are going to continue to go up. We've seen them bounce around, but they're back above $100. And that feeds through. So fertilizer prices are now rising. Plastic producers in Asia are now having to cut down. The oil price in the States has jumped by the most ever in a day as a result of this. And that's their strategy. They're going to continue to cause chaos because their big stick is turbulence on the international energy markets.
Ben, it's not even been 2 weeks. I think by the 12th day itself, that decision had already come in that the IEA and also US from its own SPR, they will need to dip into their reserves. 400 million barrels, that dip has already started. Where you spoke about the deadline or the timeline that Trump has, the US has, and the timeline that Iran has. The timeline for the US would be the midterm elections. That's a few months away, but Trump would not want it to last anywhere closer to the midterms. He would not want to get into the midterms with the shadow of this war looming onto that. But Iran, for them, the timeline is as long as they can survive. Is that an advantage for Iran?
It is. I mean, look, there's a new kind of war, and they're fighting different wars. The American typical strategy is shock and awe. It goes in with overwhelming force. It hopes to deliver a knockout blow in the first month. It did that very effectively, for example, in Iraq. And then they impose whatever puppet government or whatever it is. Same thing in Afghanistan, did the same thing. And it's not working in Iran. Iran has been preparing for this for 10 years. I don't know, Trump is claiming that the war is, quote unquote, pretty much over. But it doesn't look like that to me. As I say, the resources are scattered all over the country and well hidden. The Americans now are chasing the launchers. They have about 200 launchers, and without those launchers, the Iranian stockpile of some 2,000-3,000 big missiles are useless. But again, the report's a little confused. Anything between 100 have been destroyed and 20 have been destroyed. And so it's a game of cat and mouse that's going on here. It's still early days. You know, the information coming out is confused. Everybody's making big claims. But as long as the IRGC can hang in there for several months, then you get up to this political deadline, and the pressure on Trump is going to become enormous to get out of it, because he's been selling himself as a peacemaker worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize. And what he's just done has started the biggest regional war in the region since probably back to 1979. Certainly in terms of oil distribution, disruptions, this is the worst crisis ever. So that's going to tell. And the Iranian side just need to spin it out as long as they can. And they're basically not fight. I mean, they just need to not be killed by this knockout blow.
And Ben, what kind of pressure can the Gulf nations exert on the US? Because the Gulf nations do not want to get into a direct confrontation with Iran. If they had to, they would have done it by now. It's been nearly 2 weeks. They've taken a good amount of strikes across Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, all of them. Oman as well.
Everyone.
Oman was actually one of the first ones to congratulate the new leader of Iran. And then there was a strike within 24 hours of that. Then Turkey has also been going in. But anyways, let's focus on the Gulf nations. What kind of pressure can they exert? Because there were reports suggesting that they would want to reconsider their investments in the US.
Yes, that's another sword hanging over the US head, because the Gulf states have been exporting oil, getting paid in dollars, but then they've been plowing that money back into US T-bills and the stock market. A big chunk of the AI bubble that's been going on is actually Arab money that's being invested into there. And if they change their mind, because the deal is like, you bring us prosperity and security, and then we take your dollars that you pay us for the oil and we reinvest them into America's markets and then help you with your prosperity. And Trump has pulled the rug out from under that deal. He's like, we've paid you the money, but then we've just started unprovoked huge war in your region that's costing you a lot of money, and they're reconsidering their investments, and they're looking at China in a completely different way now, and thinking about diversifying. And if that happens, then you'll get a stock market collapse in the state. And if they pull out the T-bills, as all the BRIC countries are already doing, particularly China, then that could cause a major debt crisis in the states, which would, be on a par with 2008, if not worse. And so they're in a very difficult, very, very difficult position, the Gulf states, and they're mediating very hard. The Saudis have been calling everybody. The Omanis have been the neutral party. So them being hit was very strange. And they play a key role. So everyone's trying to get out of this, but they haven't got any leverage over Iran.
Ben Harris, thank you so much for your time. We are going to slip into a very quick break at this point, but don't go anywhere. We are discussing all the developments in West Asia.